All right, my name is Mike Kronzer. Everyone can hear me. I suppose it's not too loud out there anymore, at least. Again, my name is Mike Kronzer. I work for MnDOT's. I'm a project manager in our new connected and automated vehicle office. This office is only, 4 to 6 months old. I lose track, but brand new. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff. So this presentation will kind of touch on not only what MnDOT's doing, but what's going on statewide in relation to connected and automated vehicles. And then I'll also go through one of our very first automated vehicle project, which is the autonomous bus project, which Michael touched on. So I'll kind of go through what we did with that. There's obviously, I'm assuming many of you have probably heard about a lot of this stuff going on around the country and the world with autonomous vehicles, but it's coming extremely quickly. I think it was just yesterday or the day prior I saw that Waymo, which is a Google company, it's their self-driving car company that Google owns, they announced that they are going to start commercial ride sharing in the Phoenix area. So people are actually going to get in these vehicles and they're actually going to pay money just like you would at Uber or Lyft, except for there's not going to be anyone driving the vehicles. And that's happening this December. So at this point, it's not really a question of when is there going to be self-driving vehicles, it's when are they going to get to Minnesota. So we're trying to prepare, that's kind of what our office is all about, is trying to prepare for what that is going to look like and make sure that when they come here and when they show up on our roadways that Minnesota's ready and we get all the benefits and hopefully none of the possible downfalls. So one of the things that I'll touch on first is an executive order from the governor that set a bunch of different things in motion that I'll talk about. I'll talk about our office, some strategic planning that we're doing, some of the current activities that we're doing, and then the past activity, which we wrapped up earlier this year, was the autonomous bus pilot project, which I'll talk about. So from the statewide perspective, not just advisory council, like I said, they're tasked with putting together this executive report. The executive report is going to look at all these different focus areas. So every time I talk to people about connected and automated vehicles, there's a million different scenarios or what ifs or what happens when such and such happens. They're trying to cover it all, and that's why it's been so much work from March of this year to having this thing due in 2 weeks. They're looking at what kind of investments should we be making in the future. Do pavement markings look different for machines versus humans? And if they do, you still have to invest in the technology so that it works for humans and machines, because there's going to be a transition period. They're looking at things like vehicle registration and licensing. One of the questions they would try to answer there is, if you're a 12 or 13-year-old kid and you don't have your license, are you allowed to get in one of these vehicles and you're not driving, but drive to wherever you want to go? Another big one is insurance. If someone, if there's a crash involving one of these vehicles, who's liable? Is it the person who owns the vehicle, or is it the person who is running or designed the technology that drives the vehicle? So a lot of things to consider. So what we're doing at MnDOT specifically, I showed here, this is kind of what Praveen has been working on. Another thing that we're doing, and that's kind of what falls to myself and the other project managers, is to lead connected automated vehicle research and development. And not necessarily MnDOT doing the research and development, but bringing in different partners that to do this testing and to kind of learn from them. They can learn from us and what our needs are, and we can figure out some of these big questions that come up with connected automated vehicles, and that kind of ties into the last piece there as well. Just a little bit about the strategic plan. There's a lot of stuff that we got to think about just as an agency ourselves. We got to think about the long-range planning. We got to think about how we're going to fund different investments that might be needed, down the line. Like I mentioned, the pavement marking piece, but there's also, signage infrastructure that we got to think about. Signs right now are designed for humans to see very well, and I think a lot of the companies that design that stuff do a pretty good job of it. I know right now 3M is specifically working on signs that are also machine readable and can convey a message to a vehicle traveling down the roadway. So that's something that's going to have to be considered in the future, and how do we invest in that. Partnerships, we got to think about regulation. A big one that keeps coming up is strategic staffing, and not just staffing for MnDOT, but also just in general talent development. It's such a new thing that's coming down the pipe, and it's going to be a revolution in the transportation industry, and we got to figure out how we're going to, develop talent to actually work in the industry and help us address, like I said, we got 7 people right now in the state or at MnDOT working on this problem. Our office is going to grow a lot, I think, in the next 5-10 years. We got to think about how we're going to, fill those gaps. So some of the activities that are going on right now, this one might not matter too much to this group, but the Minnesota Calf Challenge, it's something that's brand new to MnDOT. It's basically an open RFP, so we're basically asking industry to come to MnDOT with ideas for different connected and automated vehicle projects, which is it's kind of a new thing for MnDOT to solicit essentially unsolicited project proposals. So that's what happens with that is we take in these ideas every 2 months, and we basically, if a really good idea comes in from a company or whoever it might be, or a university, we'll fund that. If it's good but we don't have the money, we'll put it on the shelf, and if it's bad, we'll just say, yeah, we're not gonna do that. So another thing we're looking at doing is turning Highway 52 into kind of a smart corridor from St. Paul to Rochester, outfitting that. Right now we have a fiber gap, but we want to make sure that that entire thing is outfitted with fiber optic networks. And then we're going to also install roadside units which can communicate to connected capable vehicles, and we'll be able to broadcast messages about weather or pavement condition or a crash down the road. And these cars that will be connected to the infrastructure and connected to each other in the future will be able to receive those messages and notify the driver, or if the vehicle itself is the driver, notify the vehicle that there's something unexpected ahead. One thing that it's kind of on hold right now, but hopefully we'll get rolling once we kind of clear up some regulatory stuff with the executive report, is automated MnRoad truck. Michael mentioned that there's a driver that drives laps all day long, every day. His name was Doug. It was Doug, the truck driver, but he retired in March, and the idea came up from Michael's office that why don't we, look at maybe as one of our research projects, bringing in an automated truck to MnRoad. There's benefits for all. Obviously, we can possibly get more laps on MnRoad, but we can also see one of the things we found with the bus project is these things are very precise in how they drive. So if you have a fully loaded truck that's automated and it's got wheel wander that's sub-centimeter, that potentially increases rutting. So that's something that we could learn as this thing's out there. So just an opportunity to, again, collaborate with MnRoad and the industry. And lastly, this is another project that's going on right now. It's Highway 55 going from Minneapolis west. It's the Connected Corridor project. We're outfitting all the signals with, again, this essentially they're roadside units again. They're communication units that are broadcasting what's called a SPAT message, which is signal, phase, and timing, to any vehicle that can hear it. So basically, if a vehicle is equipped with the right technology to hear that, and it can display it to the driver, it's going to tell you, as you're approaching a signal, it's going to tell you, how much time you have left on green. Audi actually does this right now. They have the technology where it'll tell you how much time you have left on green, and it'll also give you like an eco dial where it's like, okay, slow down to this speed so that you save, fuel, so you're not coming up to the signal at 30 miles an hour and braking fast and then having to accelerate again. You can just coast in and then keep going. Another thing we're looking at with doing that is equipping our snowplows with the technology to hear that signal, and then giving the snowplows priority. So when it's in the middle of the night and there's a snowstorm and there's no one out there, the plows don't have to stop these signals. They can request a green. And lastly, we're also looking at developing all this data that's going out and trying to maybe put it into some sort of hub that's available to third-party vendors, because they're the ones who are going to innovate and they're going to be able to create applications for that data. So now to talk a little bit about the autonomous bus pilots, and really the focus of this was the winter weather conditions and testing autonomous vehicles in winter weather conditions. As Michael said, a lot of the stuff's going on around the country and world, and it's mostly going on in warm weather ideal climates. So places like California or Arizona or Nevada or Florida. And I was at a conference once, and the guy said, well, you know, Florida is it's the perfect place to test autonomous vehicles because we have great weather. And I was like, well, no, it's a great place to operate autonomous vehicles. It's not a good place to test them because you need to actually test the technology. So you got to kind of push its limits. So we think Minnesota is a great place to test the technology because, you know, over half the country experiences some sort of snow on the roadways at some point during the year. So the technology is going to have to be able to handle that. So some of the goals, I'll breeze over these pretty quickly. Again, it's the snow and ice thing. I covered that. Operations, one of the questions we got a lot doing this initially is why are we doing a little bus? Because MnDOT, at least in the metro area, doesn't do buses or transit. And our answer to that was when we're doing these tests, we kind of want, if we could do a test with an automated snowplow, right? But then we kind of look at our own operations and we put our blinders on. We want to see how third parties are going to be operating on our system and what do we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint, which is another one of the goals, to facilitate that technology being out on the roadway safely. Another thing we want to look at is obviously there's going to be huge benefits for mobility, and especially in the disabled community. People who can't drive in the past or can't drive right now potentially could have a lot more freedom to get around and get to different jobs and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we're involving those communities as we kind of go through the testing and some of this stuff. So, and again, influence and partnerships, that kind of ties into the office goals. We want to make sure that Minnesota, we're a player in the sandbox. We have a seat at the table, not just within the state, but nationally. And then the partnership thing is, it's going to take, MnDOT can't do this alone to prepare for all this stuff, and this is harped on in every single conference I've ever been to that involves connected automated vehicles. It's going to involve, not just MnDOT, it's going to involve other DOTs. It's not just MnDOT, it's going to be local agencies, it's going to be the private sector, it's going to be universities, it's going to be companies that we've never worked with in the past. In the last couple months, I've been on phone calls with GM, I've been on phone calls with Tesla, I've been in phone calls with any of the big OEMs, and those are people we've never ever talked to as a DOT in the past. So there's a lot of these new partnerships that we're going to have to kind of stake out as we go forward. So a little bit about the shuttle that we ended up bringing to Minnesota. It's from a company called Easy Mile. The shuttle is called the Easy 10. It's a French-based company. So I had the fun task of trying to get a vehicle shipped from France to Minnesota as a government agency, which is not fun. The vehicle itself is pretty small. It's a low-speed, urban environment design vehicle. Holds about 12 people, which would be pretty packed. Low speed, 10 to 15 miles an hour. I'll talk about this a little more in the next slide, but it's a SAE level 4 automation. So this vehicle doesn't have steering wheels or brake pedals or accelerator pedals or anything like that. How it navigates is LiDAR, which is basically, for those of you who don't know, it's basically radar but using light or lasers. And how it navigates is it's got a pre-mapped route using its LiDAR sensors, and then it uses high definition or high quality GPS to kind of navigate its route. So the levels of automation run 0 through 5. 0 is pretty self-explanatory. There's no automation on the vehicle. 1 is, this would be like adaptive cruise control, where you can take your feet off the pedals and you don't have to do anything for the acceleration or braking, but you have to be steering. It's kind of automating one part of the driving task. Level 2 is something like you'd find in a Tesla in the autopilot or a GM Cruise system, where you can take your hands and feet off of the steering wheel and pedals, but you got to be paying attention, which a lot of people haven't been doing in the Teslas, and that's why there's been some accidents. Level 3 is kind of the next step from level 2. So in theory, level 3, you can take your hands and feet off the pedals and you don't have to monitor your driving environment, but you have to be conscious and ready to take over if the system asks you to. Level 4 is you're completely removed from the driving task, and you don't have, you could take a nap in the vehicle and be fine. The difference between level 4 and 5 is that 4 is a pre-mapped route, so it's a constrained environment that it can operate. Level 5 would be the vehicle can go anywhere you want it to. You just have to plug in the address or whatever. So the project had 3 phases. The first was the testing at our MnRoad facility with our partners at MnRoad. Michael, we did a lot of coordination with you guys. And phase 2, we had a really pretty big game happen in Minneapolis last winter, and we've decided to take full advantage of that. One of the big challenges that's going to be coming down the pipe with automated vehicles is public perception and public acceptance. So we kind of realized how important it was to get people to actually see, feel, touch, experience the vehicle or the technology to become more comfortable with it. So we saw that as a huge opportunity. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then phase 3 was kind of just additional tests and demonstrations that we did around the metro area and one outside the metro. So the MnRoad testing, this was where all the winter weather condition testing took place. Kind of how we set it up is we had a bunch of different scenarios that you'd think you'd see in day-to-day operation. How was the vehicle gonna drive on its route and operate with the obstacles, vehicles, peds, bikes, things like that. And we tried to run that through with the vehicle in those ideal conditions, and then we try to replicate those same scenarios again after we had the baseline in the winter conditions. So how is it going to operate with snow on the pavement or snow falling, ice on the pavement, and then how is it going to operate when you start getting that nasty salt spray all over the sensors. So this was right when the vehicle showed up. I don't know if you can see very well, but there's actually still wrapping on the seats on the inside. I think we'd just taken the crate off the vehicle like the day before or something like that. This was November. We were hoping, obviously, to get the snow condition to do some testing, and we got that because this was like 3 or 4 weeks later. So not good for the rest of Minnesota, but good for us. This was, I think, early December. Don't expect you to read all this, but this is kind of the different conditions that we did the testing in, and we were lucky enough to get the full array of natural conditions. So we had anywhere from what was it, negative 23 degrees with the wind chill, all the way up to 40 degrees and sunny. And we did testing in the dark. We did it during sunrise, sunset, during the day. So we got a little bit of everything. These are some pictures of just some of the conditions that we were testing in. I'll kind of just scroll through these. So we had obviously the kind of more ideal conditions, the bare pavement, just a little bit of compacted snow on the roadway. Kind of upped it from there. This is, again, all natural snow, so we got lucky with that. And then we did some controlled testing. The other stuff was uncontrolled. This is controlled. Ice on the pavement, we started super small because this thing's driving itself and we've never had experience with it before. So we started with about the size of one of the wheels just to see when we're driving over it how the vehicle reacted, and we just increased the size of the ice patch, and then we noted how the vehicle drove over the ice but also stopped and started on the ice and how it handled that. More control testing. D3 does the maintenance for MnRoad, and they were nice enough to come down and put some salt down on the road, and we can kind of generate some natural salt spray conditions by driving another MnDOT vehicle in front of the automated shuttle. Another thing we did that I don't think has ever been done at MnDOT's in the history of MnDOT was make snow, and we put snow intentionally on the roadway rather than plowing it off, which was a first. So you can kind of see some of that in the pictures. The week that we made snow, we had, again, the full range of temperatures. We had the first day it showed up on Monday, it ended up being 40 and sunny, so we got really slushy junk, which was fine. It's good for testing. And then the Friday, it was negative 23. So this is a quick video. So if you end up applying for a job at MnDOT's and you do a grad engineer rotation program through our office, you have a chance to be essentially a dummy for a automated vehicle. So we're inside the shuttle right now. That's Ben, our grad engineer. If you look close, there's a little sigh of relief when it actually stops.
How many of those guys do you go through?
2. So again, the snowmaking machine, I talked about that. This is just a picture where I'm the one taking the picture. Everyone else on the project team, this was the day it was -23. Everyone else was inside the shuttle, nice and toasty warm. Just a couple more pictures. So this was phase 2 of the project. This is when we were downtown for the Super Bowl. What we did was we brought the shuttle downtown, took a lot of planning and logistics with the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County. We had blocked off just one block of Nicollet Mall, and then we had a demonstration downtown for 3 days, the first weekend of the Super Bowl, not the actual Super Bowl Sunday weekend. So we did it for 3 days. It was like 4 or 5 hours of demo a day, and we partnered, well, 3M was a partner throughout the project, but they actually ended up bringing, I mentioned that smart sign technology where it's both human and machine readable. That's one of them right there. Looks like a normal sign. They install a camera inside of the shuttle. That camera, there's basically an infrared barcode that's embedded in that sign that we can't see, but the machine can. And they had a screen inside the vehicle, and it displayed the sign and different information. They can basically have that sign project whatever digital information they want it to. So they were a partner on the project as well. Just a couple pictures from the project. Got lucky with the weather, obviously. Could have been a lot worse. The actual Super Bowl Sunday weekend was, I think we had the big snowstorm on that Saturday night, and it was freezing. We had a super good turnout, a lot better than expected, and I think there's a lot of word of mouth going on. We ended up having almost 1,300 people ride the shuttle in 3 days for 4 hours a day. And we're only giving rides to 6 people at a time because there's only 6 seats, and for safety reasons, we didn't want to pack the shuttle with 12 people. So as you can see, increased each day. I think word of mouth was getting out, and there was a lot of good feedback. We did do a survey too to just kind of gauge public perception of the technology. We gave the survey after people rode, so we got it after they experienced the technology, and there's some AAA surveys going that have gone out, and it fluctuates a whole bunch, but it's like 2/3 of people right now are unsure about the technology. But after what we found after people rode is that I think it was 82% of respondents said that they were excited about the technology, or they felt comfortable with the technology after riding. So this is kind of the phase 3 part. Other demonstrations, we took it to a whole bunch of different places. We took it to the state capitol, which actually coincided with that executive order that was announced in March. Again, just giving the public another chance to see the vehicle, but also get legislators out there a chance to see the vehicle and ask questions, and kind of put that on the radar. We brought it to the 3M campus. They were one of the partners on the project. We brought it down to Rochester, so the city of Rochester, and then the Destination Medical Center, so Mayo. We did a demo down there. We brought it to the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, where we had the vehicle run back and forth across Washington Avenue Bridge from East Bank to West Bank. And we brought it to Hennepin County Greenway. And then we also had a whole bunch of tours at MnRoad, where we brought different stakeholders from around the state and different groups to experience the shuttle itself up there. So this is not going to work, but there is a project video. It's pretty easy to find if you Google MnDOT Autonomous Bus Project. It should be the one. There's a couple videos up there, but it's the main one. The other ones are of my boss, Jay, giving interviews, so you don't care about those. Key project findings for the autonomous bus project. What we ended up finding is this vehicle in particular, and it's always going to depend on the technology that's being used, but this vehicle in particular, because it's using LiDAR and GPS rather than cameras, there's like Siegel lane lines and things like that. It did pretty well with different pavement conditions. What really threw it off is the falling precipitation. So falling snow, rain, blowing snow, things like that. The LiDAR sensors that are all over this vehicle are super, super sensitive, and they pick up everything. And obviously the designers of the vehicle are conservative, so what happens is the vehicle sees things with these sensors, and it basically is determining these things are hazards, and whether it's a snowflake or it's a person. So what they did throughout our project, they were obviously gathering a whole bunch of data through their sensors as we were doing the testing. They incrementally improve their algorithms on the back end for their system to start filtering out and being more intelligent about, you know, the vehicle. What is it seeing? Is it seeing snow falling in front of it, or is it seeing a barrel or a vehicle or a person? And obviously they're super conservative and they got a ways to go, but they slowly throughout the project, so they would notify us when they made those improvements, and you could see some noticeable improvement. Although in the picture of the vehicle getting blasted by the snow machine, it didn't move there. That basically all it was seeing was a wall. But so that was the big challenge. And then the other big takeaway, like I said, was the public just wants more experiences to learn about autonomous vehicles. Like I said, there's a lot of people who are unsure about the technology, and we found that public education, public outreach is incredibly helpful to advance the technology. It's going to, I mean, the technology won't advance without public acceptance eventually, so that's going to be a big part of it. There's a link at the bottom here for, there's a report if you care, but there's also a website that has other cool stuff like the video and pictures and things like that. So that is it. Any questions?
How many engineers does it take to test drive an EV?
Technically 0. No, we had, I don't know, we probably had, well, it was myself, and then I had 2 grad engineers on rotation through that program. We're up there for MnDOT's, and then we had MnRoad people up there helping out when we needed help out, and then we also had a consultant team that was helping us out up there. And then we had project partners like 3M and First Transit, and then obviously Easy Mile had people there too. So it was pretty busy. I don't know how a normal winter is up there, but it seemed to be
a lot slower than last week.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was obviously a lot of interest in it, so there's a lot of different groups wanting to be involved.
You said it would drive in the same pattern, like in the same, I guess, gap.
Yeah.
Car.
Yeah.
Is that a huge problem because you're driving the exact same spot of the road for maintenance like that?
Yeah, so that's one of the things, that's one of the big questions. Like, we didn't think about it going into this project, but especially when you're driving in snow, you can really see how precise the thing is as it's driving its route. And we were finding sub-centimeter wander of the wheels. So the route we actually programmed, we didn't go around the whole 2.5 mile loop. We went, I don't know, it ended up being like 3/4 of a mile, and MnRoad has gravel crossovers, so we utilized one of those, and we ended up seeing rutting from the shuttle going over the gravel because the route was so precise. So there's a big question of should the technology providers program in like artificial wander to prevent that, but then they come back with, well, that's a liability for us because we'd rather be more precise than less precise. So it's going to be a big question. I don't know if it'll end up eventually someday changing pavement design, especially when you start talking about automated trucks and heavy loads. But yeah, it's a very big question right now.
Can I add a little bit? Yeah, so that's from a pavement engineer standpoint, that's what we're trying to get the autonomous vehicle folks to consider, is that kind of channelized traffic. And the other big challenge with platooning vehicles, you're going to have heavy vehicle loads that are closer and closer together. So you're getting like trucks that there's less relaxation time of the pavement in between vehicle events. So that's another thing that's going to increase the fatigue and rutting that we're seeing in pavements. And it's not a challenge that we can't overcome, but like Mike's saying, it's something everybody needs to be aware of and collaborate on.
Yep. Yeah, and to your point too, it's not just pavements with the platooning thing. There's also how do you adjust your bridge designs when you have these heavy loads really closely spaced, traveling over bridges. So it's going to affect most of the roadway infrastructure, and we got to figure out how it's going to affect it. And again, it's a big collaborative thing. We got to get everyone talking to everyone. So.
What's the problem the problem with automating the MnRoad truck? It would seem like a perfect combination of MnRoad research and vehicle research.
Yeah, I mean, that we're trying to do that. The holdup is the regulatory piece because none of these automated truck companies are in Minnesota. So they're going to want more than just, okay, we'll bring our truck up and run laps at your MnRoad facility. So we're trying to be strategic about establishing partnerships here, and then also making the testing environments and what they can and can't do very clear as well. If a company like that comes up here, they're probably going to want a carrot at the end of the project, which might be a partnership with, you know, Amazon or Land O'Lakes or Target or something like that, and they'll probably want to do some sort of testing or deployment on like 94 or something like that. So we got to get all that straightened out before we can actually bring or do that outreach and try to bring them here.
In the first part of your talk, you talked about connected. What does that mean?
Yeah, so automated is obviously things are automated within the vehicle and the driving task. Connected is communications. So there's what's called V to I, which is vehicle to infrastructure communications, and V to V, which is vehicle to vehicle communications. And the idea there is a connected vehicle will broadcast what's called a basic safety message, which essentially is, it's like a here I am message. So it's broadcasting its current position, maybe the length of the vehicle, its speed, acceleration, its current direction, and it's broadcasting that 10 times a second to anyone that's listening. And the idea is if all cars are doing that, it kind of becomes this big network of, and cars will know where other cars are or what other cars are doing at all times. And that's just the vehicle-to-vehicle piece. So there's also vehicle infrastructure, like talking to signal. The car is talking to the signal, signal's talking to the car. It's going to be, that technology is probably coming quicker than the automated side, but they're going to have to work together. There's a lot of challenges that is seen in the AV side that can probably be solved by adding the connected piece and that communications piece. So that's where that connected piece kind of ties in. Nothing else? All right. Like Mike said, MnDOT is always hiring. The grad rotation program is awesome. That's actually how I ended up at my job. I was in the grad rotation program until my current boss plucked me out of it a couple years ago, and now I'm working with self-driving cars. So pretty cool. It's a great opportunity. Again, and you rotate around MnDOT. You get to see different offices, experience different things, see what you thought you liked that you end up liking, or maybe thought you liked or you don't, and you end up not liking it. It's a great program, and again, MnDOT's always hiring. And then our office, like I said, is, I can't guarantee this, but I'm willing to bet that it was going to be expanding quite a bit in the next, in the near term. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.